Today on Owl Have You Know.
When I went to work at Rice and we had an opportunity to do something international, these kind of experiences were so transformational for me. Bringing these to students in the program was something that I was super enthusiastic about.
Welcome in, welcome in. This is Owl Have You Know. I'm your host, David Droogleever. And today we have a very, very special guest, Sean Ferguson, on the line with us. And Sean and I go way back, homies from when I was getting my MBA in 2010, 2012. And sad to have seen him leave, but he has gone on to flourish and do many things internationally and cross-culturally. So, Mr. Sean Ferguson, thank you so much for coming on. I'll have you know. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks, Dave. And it's Dr. Sean Ferguson. No, just joking, man.
Oh, hey.
It's great to catch up, man. It was a real pleasure working with you when I was at the Jones School, and as an alum and an employee, to see candidates like yourself go on to do such great things, man. That's part of what makes the purpose of what we do really feel valuable. So good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And good call out. I mean, here's the thing. You have so many bullets on your resume that it's easy to skip past one. And that's a recent thing as well, getting your PhD. And we could maybe fast forward to the end because that's clearly an important component of the feathers in your cap. So is that something that you planned on getting your PhD, long ago, like you wanted to rise to that level, or is that something that sort of fell on your lap? Can you kind of explain maybe the rationale for having gotten to that level of education?
So we were talking about this just before we started, and my father, he's from Jamaica. He's an immigrant, right? He came to the U.S. and for him, he had always wanted me to get a PhD, right? And he was looking for me to get a PhD in electrical engineering. And what I tried to explain to him is that when you get a PhD, that has to be something that you have a passion and a commitment to. And for me, that just wasn't the case with electrical engineering. I had gotten into it because it was a good job, steady, that kind of thing. And in his generation, if people didn't go continuously to grad school, he thought they would never go. And when I stopped at Michigan and then went to Rice, he didn't think I would go to Rice. And then when I got done with Rice, he didn't think I would get a doctorate. And so, but it was because I found my sense of purpose and the issues that really matter to me as an individual. And just to take it back a little bit, I came to Rice. When I came to Rice to work, I was looking for something with a greater sense of purpose. And I didn't know that working for Rice would be that. I just knew I felt good about the product and I believed in the product. But for me, it was the way that I started to appreciate what I was doing at Rice is that business schools and MBA programs are leadership factories, right? And I think we all can agree that the world needs more leaders. And when I had the opportunity to get a doctorate in global education, it was a way for me to kind of proliferate my impact in higher education, in a global context. And so that was the real motivation. I had finally found that thing where I could spend all my time kind of evaluating and questioning things and thinking about how we could bring knowledge and insights to my practice.
So your focus has always been, as you said, proliferation, your impact in a global context. And is that something that's just been wired into you? I mean, having that international perspective, quick tip of the hat to Rice Business, always having a lot of international folks come in and then doing programs overseas. I remember going to South America when I was getting my business degree. And, that is something that is obviously, if you're not pursuing that breadth of education and experience these days, you're basically tone deaf, right? It's not, not just the US these days, so in terms of keeping your, let's just say, aperture, at a global level, is that something that was driven from when you're young? Is that something that you felt like was your niche, as you're proceeding through your career?
Man, that's a great question, Dave. I think the main driver is just experiences. And so, I grew up in Detroit, around the way. And in my world, I went to a school that was, 95% African American. Like literally, I could go days and days without seeing anyone who was non-black in Detroit. And then, when I had the opportunity to experience things outside of Detroit, it made me appreciate what was great about Detroit for me, but it also made me appreciate what was great about things that were outside of Detroit. And it created this kind of curiosity and this interest in culture, people, and just different experiences. So, like, my junior year of Michigan, I went to California for the first time to visit one of my friends who was doing an internship out there. And when I went to California, it was such a striking experience. I got off the plane, and I, coming from the Midwest, I'm used to seeing black people and white people. And when I get to California, I was like, where are the black and white people at? It was such a mosaic of different colors, cultures, and everything. And I used to want to be mayor of Detroit, so because I thought, hey, why would I ever leave Detroit, right? But when I went to California and just saw that, I was like, I think I need to see what's going on in the rest of the world. And so beyond that, it was like next thing I didn't know, I moved to Georgia, and then I go to Rice, and then then you become a little bit more self-aware. You're like, okay, I'm half Jamaican. My wife, her parents are from Trinidad. She was born in Canada, and so it just this kind of snowballing of cultural experiences just continue to pique my curiosity, and I think that's what kind of put me on the global path. And so when I went to work at Rice and we had an opportunity to do something international, and these kind of experiences were so transformational for me. Bringing these to students in the program was something that I was super enthusiastic about.
Wow. Yeah, yeah, we need more of that. I think that again, that broader view and the widening of the aperture in terms of cultural impact and how that integrates with business and of course vice versa. Can you zone in on, Rice specifically, of all the places you could have gotten your master's in business administration? Why Rice?
So my wife is from Houston, so that's kind of where the story starts. We went to Michigan together, and we were just trying to co-locate and get to the same place. And I was like, when I was considering business schools, I was thinking of all the big names, the top 10, top 20 schools. And then my wife, when thinking about building a dual career, it's kind of hard to find a location where two kind of upwardly mobile professionals can thrive. And she was like, well, have you ever thought about Rice? And at that time, Rice wasn't accredited and it wasn't ranked or anything like that. And so I was like, no, I hadn't thought about Rice at all. But what was going on at that time was an amazing transformation. And so they had brought along Dean Gilbert Whitaker. And if you know, I'm a Michigan man, and Dean Whitaker was the dean who put Michigan's business school on the map. And so I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And then when I looked at the data, right, the data on salaries and things of that nature, the school salaries were top 20, top 25. And so I was like, okay, so yeah, it's not accredited. It looks like there's an upward trajectory. I felt like, it was still a young school at the time, what, maybe like 24, 25 years old. And so I felt like it was something I could be a part of, right? Whereas if I went to some of the established schools, it was a situation where, I just had to get on board, shut up, and not break anything, right? And I think Rice was the perfect place to kind of be entrepreneurial. I felt like they embraced this guy from Detroit, right, who was, just, talking and this or that. And so I thought it was a great place for me, and they made me feel welcome from day one. And that was really, also there was this other great fact. I remember looking in this Princeton Review book, right, and they said it had all the business schools, and Rice had the most hours of study per day. And I thought it's got to be legit, right? If it's not rough, it's not right. And that really kind of gave me some credit to as far as the rigor. And so I thought the rigor was right, the people were right, and I felt like Houston was an emerging city at that time, and it might not have been the highest ranked school I could go to, but I felt like if you really did a needs analysis of what I needed at that point in my career, wife, family, school, everything, it was the perfect fit, and it was the absolutely best decision I could have ever made. And sometimes you don't know that when you're making these decisions, but looking back 20 years later, it was such a slam dunk, no brainer, home run, grand slam.
Wow. I like to think that, and this is sort of my quick tip for current and prospective students is, I mean, the networking, at Bryce, is absolutely phenomenal. And is the thing that to me stood out the most and made the most impact for me during school and afterwards. I mean, I still have, business so my peers, calling from overseas, locally, and we've all kept in touch. So
This is so underrated about Rice. As small as we are, as young as we are, everywhere I go, I find a Jones schooler who's putting it down, making an impact in their respective part of the world, right? And so I think that's also a tribute to the school and the network. Sometimes we don't have 90,000 alums like Harvard, but what I always would tell you guys when I was a student is that the intensity of the relationships and the connectivity between the school is second to none.
well, you're not giving yourself enough credit, so I'll do it for you. I mean, under your leadership, I mean, that was embedded into the DNA. Let's get to sort of what you're up to these days. I think it's really, really interesting. And I mean, I know there's a lot to pack. You've gone over to Asia. You're at Hong Kong University as the assistant dean, and now at the Asia School of Business. So, what was the what precipitated that shift, right? To leave the U.S. and then go and pursue, being in leadership positions in higher education, over in Asia and Southeast Asia. Can you help us give a little context on your decision methodology there?
Yeah, so I think and I have this session that I give for students that talks about you have to be engaged, contribute, things of that nature to the profession that you're in, and if you do that, good things will happen. And you know, it was funny. It was 2012, Michigan and Alabama, and everything I say is a sports analogy. And so since I'm talking to an American, they can relate to this. But like Michigan and Alabama were playing in Dallas at the Jerry Dome, and we got killed. And then the next morning, I get this email from a search firm, Korn Ferry, and they're like, "Would you be interested in considering our associate dean role in Hong Kong?" And I was like, "Wow, this is interesting." And funny how life foreshadows. The year before, I took a group of students to Hong Kong, and we had a fantastic time. And it happened to be my 10-year anniversary. So my wife and I took my wife on that particular trip with me, and we were like, "Oh man, if we ever could live in Hong Kong, we would totally do it." And then the next year, someone reached out to me about working in Hong Kong, and what was really funny about that experience is that a year before that, I did a presentation with the person in that role. I was talking about how Rice's upward trajectory as an American school, and he was talking about HKUST, Hong Kong University of Science and Technology's upward trajectory. And so I knew all this stuff about this business school. And so when the search firm reached out to me, they were blown away by what I knew about this business school, Hong Kong, and all that, and all those different aspects. And at the time, it's hard because for most of my professional career, I've been Mr. Rice, and so to leave Rice, that was a a big decision. And then as we got over there, I felt the kind of impact that I was having, and we both, like, as a professional, everything that we did over there was a little bit interesting because it was so much on the frontier, right? So we're bringing management education to Asia, and we're adapting it for the needs of this part of the world, and that was super exciting. And then when this opportunity came up with MIT Sloan and the Central Bank of Malaysia to be a part of Asia School of Business, I thought, man, this is something where I can have even more impact from the early stage, bring some of that energy that I tried to bring to Rice and HKUST. Imagine the effect if you're there at year 1 or 2 as opposed to year 20 or more. And so that's been great. And it's been a tremendous experience because the this business doesn't pay that much, but the social capital that I've been able to build, whether it's Rice, HKUST, ASB, has really been transformational for me. And I kind of see now, my thing is just I'm trying to connect talent with opportunity, bringing management education to the emerging world to really have the most impact.
So I think there's two things that are going through my head right now. One is sort of the like a compare and contrast, between the three different programs that you've been deeply embedded into. And then the second thing is, what does that future sort of look like, in terms of, how you're structuring things? Because where you are right now, as you said, there's sort of a startup ish energy, right? Where you get to shape things and create some impact. So I'll take the first one first, if you don't mind. And between those three different programs, you have Rice Business, HKUST, and then Asia School of Business. Could you give a sense of sort of like the maybe the differences, in terms of like the culture and the charter of each of the different universities, and who would go and what they would expect to, get out of each?
So I think like, American business schools have really nailed this, mid-professional career kind of development that you get in the MBA. And I think, Rice is, a fantastic place, particularly like in Houston, one of the most diverse cities in the world, with, the most Fortune 500 companies. So the canvas is amazing there. And one of the things that I didn't appreciate when I went to Rice was that there were other schools that are ranked high, but they weren't in big dynamic cities like Houston. And so I think, that it's kind of shaped my view of what a transformational MBA experience would be like. And you take that to Hong Kong. The one thing that's different about HKUST and ASB in the US, more of the student body is American. At international business schools, it's the reverse, right? So at HKUST, only 5% of the students were from Hong Kong, and maybe 30% were from China. The rest were all from all over the world. At ASB, they're only 30% Malaysian, and the rest are from all over the world. So the American influence isn't so strong. ASB and HKUST, when they were deciding the kind of spirit and model they had, they're both heavily American influence, right? So most of the faculty have come from American business schools and things of that nature. And so I think that's how they're similar. But I think Hong Kong is kind of like a New York, right? Kuala Lumpur is kind of like Asia's Houston. It's that, that underrated city, that people don't always think about, but there's so much hidden value there, and there's so many hidden gems. The cost of living is cheap, the sprawl is terrible, just like in Houston, but the opportunity is here. And in KL, it's kind of underrated because from a development standpoint, I would say it's closer to like say a Singapore and a Hong Kong than it is to say a Jakarta or a Manila, right? So there's this business potential here that's kind of undercover. They're all different, and they all have their own little spirit, but I think they're world class in their own ways.
Perfect answer. And I know that was a loaded question, and of course, you gracefully cruised through it. Assuming you have a good view of the next couple of years. I mean, and then there's of course COVID kind of setting things off the rails. So maybe that's a better question, in terms of your efforts at ASB right now. And I'm sure you have, like a multi-year strategy of where you want to take the program. And then, hey, later on, the pandemic, which has affected everyone, created an immense amount of uncertainty, whether it's business, higher education, families, everything in between. So can you give us a sense of, what the future looks like for you with your efforts at ASB, and how COVID has affected that plan, both for the administration as well as the students and the programs that you're helping to shape?
What I would say is that it's not going to go back to the way it was, and I would say 6 months ago we were thinking like, well, when this thing settles down, but it's not so clear that this thing is going to settle down, even if there's a vaccine or things of that nature. Like we're going through spikes. Malaysia's done a great job of managing it. We were down in the single digits just like 2 months ago, and now we're back up to 500 cases per day. And what happens is people are getting fatigued with it. And so it's something that I think we have to live with. And I think as a school, what we're talking about is like, how do we change our education model now that borders are closed in so much of the world? Our educational experience was really built around action learning. We do it every semester at ASB, and we would do the projects would take place in Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia. We had projects as far as Saudi Arabia, and that was a super huge selling point for our applicants. And so now we can't do that. And so now I think what we're coming to reality is like, how do you deliver that kind of intense, emotional kind of experience? We might not be able to guarantee the exact same thing because of this new pandemic-oriented world or the acceleration of technology or the economic cycles. And so that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Yeah, that was a good one. I know that was a heavy-handed one to toss your way. Kind of now that we have the sort of COVID answer and kind of a sense of where you are right now and things globally, kind of segues nicely to sort of the other sort of global impact, especially, of course, in America, where now, I mean, diversity and inclusion in the last couple of decades has always been a big topic. I know in the companies that I've been at, there's a big focus on employee resource groups. Of course, at Rice Business, we had various groups that would get together and amplify diversity and inclusion. And so I feel like in progressive companies and business schools that have their head on straight, this is a big focus. And when with you being very highly cultured, of course being abroad, what is your view, in terms of how schools, especially overseas, are bringing in this topic of diversity and inclusion, into the program, and how they might maybe have a framework as they go out, into business, out into the world, and make that relevant to whatever organization that they're part of. What does that look like, for the programs that you've been part of, and how do you make diversity and inclusion relevant, for the students during the program and as they, go out into the world?
So I think Rice graduates, especially those who participate in action learning, can appreciate the taking of theory and putting it into practice, and working in cross cultural settings where you can develop a cross cultural savvy. And I think what we try to do here with our action learning. So there's one part of like, okay, we're going to teach you ops management, or we're going to teach you market research, but then to put that in a different cultural context through action learning. Like we had a group that was doing a market research project for a large CPG company in Myanmar for detergent, and they're trying to do digital surveys and things of that nature, and there's no solution except to get on the ground and pound the pavement, and they're like lugging detergent up these narrow stairs and talking to people and translating folks, translating the survey verbally, and seeing the conditions that people are living in, and getting a sense of what's really going on. And so these kind of experiences are not just about teaching people operations management in a practical setting, but that cross cultural kind of engagement and sophistication that you get from, all right, one semester you're doing a project in Malaysia, the next semester you're doing a project in Indonesia, the next semester you're doing a project in Myanmar. You're not going to be a expert in Indonesian culture just based on that one project, or Myanmar just based on that one project. But by being in so many of these different situations, and then being in Malaysia, which, not sure how many people are familiar, but Malaysia is kind of a fusion of all the big cultures of Asia. We call it Malaysia, the real Asia here. So Chinese, Indian, and the South, indigenous Southeastern East Asians, Malays, form the population here. So there's kind of like a triumvirate of people. And so between these experiences, I think our students develop this heightened sophistication and savvy when it comes to cross cultural interaction. And for me, as an African American, sometimes like so much of what's going on in diversity and inclusion is geared from the lens of how Americans view diversity and inclusion. And so I think it's helped make me, even though I think I'm pretty well cultured and exposed, it's helped me check some of my biases, or seeing from the outside experiences that maybe I couldn't see from the outside when I was in the U.S. And so I think our students benefit tremendously from this kind of experience.
Super insightful answer on a loaded topic. So, in the spirit of, I'll have it's you've been pretty good with fleshing out, all your various efforts, and putting a lot of detail on your LinkedIn, and being super open and transparent. Is there sort of a little known fact, that you'd like to impart to the audience, in a sort of a I'll have format, that you haven't shared with us already?
I was in high school. I was in junior ROTC, and at Renaissance High School. It's the best high school in the city of Detroit. And I was in the junior ROTC program. I was just doing my thing, just being a good cadet and that kind of thing. And through a series of different events, we had this history of our school was kind of like the top magnet school in the city, like a Bel Air or something like that, and in Houston. And um, there were all these people who were, we had a tradition of having corps commanders come from our high school. And there was this line of people in front of me who were supposed to be the corps commander or that kind of thing. And I went and I became the corps commander for the city of Detroit ROTC programs. And so I got this saber and, this award. And even though it's in high school, and there's a lot of things I think I've done well, but that one, it's those little moments that kind of catalyze something early in your life that kind of really help put you on a path. Because so at the military ball, I go through this ceremony and everything, and it was great. And it's, I reflect on this because 2 years earlier, or maybe 3 years earlier, when I was a freshman, I had asked this girl to go with me to the military ball, and she said yes. And then I guess a senior asked her to go to prom, and so she couldn't get two dresses, right? So she told me she couldn't go to the military ball. So I had this ticket by myself, and my mom drove me to the military ball. I'm going stag. And Hugh, my brother, at this time, he's like super young. He was like, "Look, Sean, there's another dude without a girl going in there." And so the kind of 2 years or however many years later at graduation to be the corps commander, sometimes you just never know what life is foreshadowing for you. That's why I'm always positive, and I always think it's always darkest before the dawn, right? So
Well, that's a very salient message, especially with, as you alluded to, this seemingly perennial, ongoing pandemic that, as you said, is fatiguing everyone. So I think that that's an appropriate mantra for this time. Sean, thank you so much. And I really appreciate your time. Any final pearls of wisdom to impart to the Rice Business alumni community, which is likely the vast majority of folks listening, as well as prospective and current students, that perhaps you might have wanted to know at any of those stages of the business and educational life cycle?
I think, the thing I always tell people, and this is what I told you guys: whatever you do, rep hard and give it your A game at whatever you do, and you'll be fine in life. And Rice is a great place for you to, kind of cultivate that energy and that rep hard spirit.
The rep hard spirit. I love it. Well, Dr. Sean Ferguson, thank you so much. This was a pleasure, and we will chat soon.
Take care, man. Thanks for the opportunity, Dave, and the alumni community.
Take care. Bye.
This has been I'll Have You Know. Thanks for listening. You can find links and more information about our guests, hosts, and announcements on our website, business.rice.edu. Please subscribe to this podcast wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and leave us a comment while you're at it and let us know what you think. I'll Have You Know is a production of Rice Business and is sponsored by the Rice Business Alumni Board. The hosts of I'll Have You Know are myself, Christine Dobbin, and David Droogleever.